Hey y'all, it's Darla here with Growing Tropical, and in today's video I'm going to be shredding some fallen tree leaves. Now I'm going to be showing you 3 different ways that I utilize fallen tree leaves in my garden beds. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going ahead and I'm going to be shredding them up. I have a couple of piles actually right here behind me that have been laying here for probably a good month now, maybe even a little bit longer than that. We've had so much windy weather lately here in South Florida, and every time I try to get out here and I try to shred these leaves up, the wind just like whips all over the place, and it just makes a really big mess. So I've just kind of been sitting put, waiting for that opportune time to be able to get out here and to be able to shred these leaves up. And I think today is a pretty good day. There's a little bit of a golf breeze out here, which is beautiful because it's a little bit cooling, even though it's like really super hot out here. There's just a mild breeze. But anyway, what I'm going to be doing, y'all, is I'm going to be going ahead and shredding up a bunch of leaves. And then after I get through shredding these, we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how I actually utilize these in my garden beds. So let's go ahead and get these leaves all shredded up, and we'll come back and we will talk a little bit more about these shredded leaves. Okay, now that I have these leaves pretty much all shredded up, I have a little bit more to do, but for the most part, I got a really big garbage can full of leaves, and I've got a really good start here. So now let me talk to you guys a little bit about how I use them in my garden. There's 3 different ways that I like to utilize them in my garden beds. Number 1, I like to use them as a soil amendment. Now let me explain to you. Living here in South Florida, we have extremely sandy soils that retain absolutely no water and no nutrients. We're nutrient deficient here because of our soils being so sandy. So what I like to do, a couple different things. I like to, depending on what I'm actually doing in the yard, if I'm working on like a flower bed, what I'll do is I will take these leaves and I'll just throw them all over the tops of the existing native soil, and I will take a tiller and I will just till them all into the native soil and just churn those up. And by the leaves already being broken down quite a bit because I've shredded them now, they're going to decompose so much quicker. And as those leaves start decomposing, we've got a really nice recipe for really making that soil so nutrient rich, because not only as these things, these shredded leaves, as they start decomposing, we're feeding the microbes and we're feeding the worms. We are also creating moisture retention, and when I fertilize, the fertilizer is going to be able to be taken up so much, it's going to be more readily available, I should say, because now I have a much healthier baseline, I guess, if you will. The other way that I like like to be able to do it is, if I'm planting, like, just say some annuals, or maybe I'm going to throw a shrub or something, if I don't have any black cow, which there are times when I don't always have leaves readily available, and I will buy a couple bags of black cow as a soil amendment. But when I have these leaves available, I like to just take these leaves, and as I'm digging holes or whatever, I like to just throw these not decomposed, these shredded leaves down into the hole and kind of just churn it all up, and be able to set my plant down inside there. And then again, once again, as those leaves start to decompose, they're creating such a beautiful environment in that native soil. And as I'm watering, you know, I'm able to retain water a lot easier, because it's creating a much more stable environment versus just sand. So now, if you, on the flip side of that, if you have, like, say for example, a clay soil, the same situation applies to putting these leaves down and tilling it into soil, or maybe just adding it as you're putting in plants. Because what's going to happen is, as these leaves decompose, now you're going to be creating an aeration. That soil, that clay soil, it's going to allow that clay soil to break up. It's going to create a little bit more airflow in there, and it's going to be just a really good recipe as you continue to add these leaves as you know, into that soil. So again, it's such a great benefit whether you have a clay soil or a heavy soil, or you have a sandy, like a light soil that has no water retention whatsoever. Now, number two, you can use them as a weed suppressant. They are wonderful. They are fantastic, actually. When they fall just from the trees, they fall down into my garden beds, and I'm not always really great about taking them out of the flower beds. Usually it's when they fall in the driveway and they fall on my grass that I start raking them and blowing them all together, and at that time I put them all together, and that's when I usually shred them in. But back to the weed suppression, I know that it works firsthand, because when these whole leaves fall from the trees and they actually fall into my garden beds, and I leave them whole, I have literally zero problems with weeds in my garden beds. It really is nice, because they're literally smothering those weeds out. So they will act as a nice weed suppression suppressant if you actually throw them, whether leaving them whole. And I'll explain in just a minute why not always leaving the leaves whole is a good idea. But I digress. Back to what I was talking about. If you take these leaves all shredded up and you throw them all over your, like in garden beds, existing garden beds, and you use them as like a top dressing, like a mulch or whatever, you're going to do yourself such a favor, because I find by putting these leaves down, they act as a beautiful, beautiful weed suppressant, much like a mulch that you buy at the store. But it's a lot cheaper because you're making it yourself from the leaves that naturally fell on your property. Now, let me go back a little bit and talk to you about the leaves that fall on your lawn. You know, a lot of people believe that the leaves are toxic to your lawn. And all the research that I've done, and in my experience, the leaves that are falling on your lawn are not toxic to your lawn. Let me explain to you why I think that this happens. When the leaves fall on your lawn, they're whole. They're not obviously shredded, and they just, you know, I don't know how it is in the northern states, but here in Florida, we go through. Usually, it's more like in January and February when the leaves just start falling out of namely oak trees. As they fall into my front yard, for example, they just keep falling and they keep falling, and the leaves just pile up and they pile up and they pile up. It's not the leaves that are actually toxic, it's that it's suffocating the lawn, and that is why it's dying. That's why you'll get bare spots in your yard if you've got like an area where a lot of the leaves have fallen, and you'll come out and you'll be like, oh my gosh, those leaves were toxic and they killed my lawn. No, that's not really the case, or that's not what I'm reading, or that's not really what I experience. It's the layers upon layers upon layers of leaves that are actually on that lawn that are suffocating it, not allowing that lawn to get the air that it needs, the airflow, not allowing the lawn to get the water that it needs, or the fertilizer. So basically you have just created a real bad environment for your lawn by raking them all up, or better yet, by mulching them in. If you had a mulching mower, or if you didn't have a mulching mower and you just wanted to rake them up and you wanted to mulch them really good, mulching those leaves in, now the shredded leaves, now you've created a much better environment, because those leaves are going to, they're not laying on top of each other, you know, keeping, you know, as a barrier, I guess I should say, as a barrier to keep any of the air and nutrients, you know, from being able to reach that lawn. Now you've shredded them all up, and they're going to decompose very, very quickly. And guess what? They're actually going to feed your lawn naturally. So it is, I think it's been debunked that that leaves being toxic to the lawn is no. That's a falsehood. But there is a reason why people do think that. So now, by mulching those leaves into your lawn, now you have just eliminated any and all obstacles of those leaves piling on top of one another and blocking the nutrients that the lawn needs to actually thrive. And so, not to mention, it's creating a beautiful, fertile environment as those leaves start to decompose into that soil. At least in my experience, I have St. Augustine grass, and my St. Augustine grass gets more beautiful and more beautiful as we mulch these leaves into the soil. So now, a third way that I like to utilize these guys in my landscape, and actually it's not really in the landscape, it's pretty much into a composter, which eventually ends up into my landscape. So I guess you could say that it's kind of into my landscape indirectly. But they make a wonderful, wonderful compost to your composter. To add these shredded leaves into that composter, it adds carbon-rich, which is your brown materials. It adds a carbon-rich material into that composter. It helps to feed the microbes and the worms, which help that composter break down a lot faster. So there you guys have it. 3 different ways that I like to be able to utilize the fallen tree leaves in my yard. And again, I think it's really funny. Irony is that I don't have an oak tree on my property anywhere. They're just all my neighbors that surround us that have oak trees. And from the breezes, the winds and stuff that we get, they blow into my yard. They blow in quite heavily. And I get out there with my rake if I want to go ahead and I want to mulch them into this garbage can and throw them into one of the 3 ways that I talked to you about. Or if I want to just take my mulching mower and I just want to mulch over my, the leaves that are in the yard. So let me just add one thing also about putting these shredded leaves on your garden beds as a mulch. Now, I'm not really a fan of the way the leaves actually look as a final touch in my garden beds. So I will go to the nursery or the store, and I will purchase store-bought mulch as a final look to my garden beds. But here's the beautiful thing: by utilizing these shredded leaves in my garden beds, I'm having to utilize store-bought mulch a lot less, because now, instead of having to buy 10 or 15 bags, I can get away with maybe 5 bags, because I'm not spreading it near as thick, because now I'm just utilizing it more as a pretty look, if you will, because I like the way I like to either use like a pine bark nugget, because I like the way that bold look. And then this year I'm going to do something a little different in one of our south side garden bed. I'm actually going to be putting some dark brown mulch down. I just think it really adds that really pretty pop that the garden bed needs, and just to enhance the color, the shrubs and stuff that you have in your garden beds. So you guys, I hope that you found this video to be helpful, to be informational, and how to utilize fallen leaves in your garden. So until the next video, bye for now.